For hundreds of years, people have been taking scrap pieces of fabric, old feed bags, layering them with a warm batting and another piece of fabric, sewing them together, and making beautiful, useful blankets. My name is Jennifer, and I am a hand quilter, and I would like to share with you a little bit about hand quilting. What I have here is I have a quilt that I started for my daughter, and I made it with the intent purpose of hand quilting butterflies. So I left a nice, beautiful space for me to do my hand quilting. When you decide you want to try hand quilting, you don't need to have a piece like this. You can just have one plain piece of cloth and draw your design on top of that. But you do need to have 3 layers. So we have the top, we have the middle, which is the batting. When you're hand quilting, you want to use a low loft bat. So you want it to be very thin, and a polyester bat is actually easier to quilt than a cotton bat. And then you'll have your backing. So you'll layer these 3 pieces together. You'll do some long stitches to hold them apart together. And then when you're ready to quilt, you will put them in your quilting hoop. Quilting hoops are usually made out of either plastic or wood, and basically it's 2 hoops. One side fits inside the other. I have the smaller side on the back, the larger side on the front. I have my quilt nice and smooth inside of here, and I have it nice and secured with this nut and bolt on the top. I also have my handy little quilting bag, and the one thing I like about hand quilting is I can take my projects with me because you really don't need a lot of supplies. What I have in here is I have my needles. I have some all-purpose needles that I use for any basic stitches I need to fix or basting issues. And then I have my quilting needles, which are called betweens. They range in sizes from 8 to 12. The higher the number, the smaller the needle. The difference between a quilting needle and a regular needle is they have a very small eye at the end where you put the thread through, and that prevents you from making holes in your quilt while you're quilting. I also have my thread. I have some all-purpose thread that I use to stitch my pieces back together or do any basting or any type of stitching that I need. And then I also have my quilting thread, which is quite a bit more expensive. It's 100% cotton, and it's very durable. And it is very important that you invest the money in the quilt, or all the time you spend making those little stitches, they're just going to break when people start to use your quilt. Last but not least, I have my seam ripper to cut my thread and take out any stitches I don't like, and I have my favorite thimble. This is called a coin thimble, and it's made of leather, and it has a little disc in it with little dimples. You actually use the thimble to push the needle through the layers of the quilt. So now that I've shown you everything that we need to do quilting, I'm going to do a demonstration of some running stitches for you and how to bury a knot and finish off a line. So I have a piece of thread here, not too long, but long enough I can get some serious quilting done, with a small needle in the end threaded through one of my between needles. And here, as you can see, I have my design drawn in the middle here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle of my design and I'm going to work my way out. Otherwise, I risk the chance of putting wrinkles as I move in. So this way I can continue to smooth them out as I'm working out. Now, one thing with hand quilting is you want the back to be just as beautiful as the front. So we don't want any not showing. So I'm going to do a stitch along my design because I want to hide my thread behind my design, and I'm going to gently pull my knot and bury it into the quilt. Now by doing this, it's stuck in between the batting and no one is going to see it. There we go. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to start back stitching. Now, a quilting stitch is just a simple running stitch. I have one finger in the back and my other hand on the top, and I'm just going to push down until I can feel it poke, and then I'm going to rock it up and poke my finger. And I'm going to continue to make this stitch, and it's called a running stitch. And the more practice you have, the better you'll get. You'll want to make sure you change your needle often because the needles do get dull and they do get dented and bent. And you'll just want to go around your whole design, just continuing to do this rocking stitch. The goal when you begin quilting is to make even stitches. You want them the same size on the back and the front. As you get better, your stitches will get smaller. So I just did a few stitches along the butterfly. Normally what I would do is go all the way around the butterfly and finish off. But for demonstration purposes, I'd like to show you traveling. You don't need to cut a new piece of thread every time you're going to move across your design. What you do is you travel. You basically take your needle, push it through the quilt. And again, I'm not going all the way through the back of the quilt. I'm staying in between the layers and I'm hiding that piece of thread. Now this is why it's important to make sure that your thread color is the same as your backing. Otherwise, if I had a dark piece of thread, you would actually see a line showing behind there. So now I can go ahead and I can work on this line here. And I'm just going to continue to do that rocking motion until all my stitches are done. Now when I get to the end, I'm going to be very careful to make sure I actually go all the way to the end of my design. Because if I only go part of the way, tie my knot, and then do my last stitch, I'll have a gap in the back. So I go all the way to the end of the line. I tie a knot as close to the body of the quilt as possible. And then I pull this knot through and I bury it in between the layers just like I did with the others. And then you have a nice finished design. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a couple that are already done. And as you can see, just nice even stitches to hold that together to make a delicate pattern on the quilt. And when you look on the back, you can also see those beautiful butterflies. You can still see my basting stitches because I'm not quite done with that. But it creates the same sort of pattern and there's no knots or gaps, but you can see the quilt beautiful. So I personally love this hobby. It's great when I'm doing it in the winter because I always have a warm blanket on my lap. Makes wonderful gifts and it's actually relatively inexpensive. Well, I hope you learned a little bit about hand quilting. Have a great night and thank you very much for your time.